Hello everyone, this is Talisman Skulls, founder of Sedutro, Arc Warlock. I was asked about the factor involving one god and three goddesses, how this would apply to the various and diverse trinities, more or less, associated with God or, the goddesses. And a diverse subject because you have to, in order to answer that, I would have to go into every single particular religious identity to go through all of the different examples. But I'm going to try to keep it as relevant and as basic as possible. And I'm going to put it in terms that pretty much anybody can understand. But I would strongly urge that each individual will take the time and research this, and not just study it, but research it themselves. So, to make this as simple as possible, if you go back to the video I showed where sacred geometry is not monotheistic, but actually a quadrotheistic system, which essentially deals with God manifesting himself symbolically, sending out three beams of consciousness and energy, which we'd call, if you take the bars and up and down, front and back, and side to side, would be with the center point called the sevenfold Spirit of God in some cases. And it's actually just three main beams that if you connect the ends to it, you get the shape of the octahedron and what have you. But then, of course, he rotates those three beams simultaneously from these parameters setting forth three-dimensional space, tracing out the circular structures and rotate them on themselves in three different directions, more or less, and then separates them off, allowing them to each have centers of their own consciousness, effectively generating three feminine beings from himself, which would be the three goddesses. They'd be triplets, not a triple goddess. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. But it's really simple. But anyway, if I was to give a proper analogy to some of the much older concepts that involve each goddess represented in triadic forms, and each one of each of the representations of God in triadic forms, it has nothing to do with a lot of people think in the West, or have assumed from misinformation, frankly, studying things like the Celtic or the Hindu, and there's a lot of different forms of Hinduism, by the way. There's not, Hinduism isn't just like one religion of India. It's literally an umbrella term. So, anyway, there was a European one based off the Indus Valley name. So, anyway, go back and check that. That's an interesting history. Check out. So, anyway, I'm going to kind of give a general reference. And it would expand into so many more concepts as well that it would take almost a lifetime for anybody to research all of it and have a complete and total grasp. But then again, how long is a lifetime, right? If we put it in the proper context, then we can look at the modes or aspects of God is basically falling within the context of modes of activity. And that would mean that, you have your creative, preserving, and destructive qualities. Kind of like in Hinduism with Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, Shiva the destroyer, but they're not separate personalities. That's the one thing that kind of gets, a bit twisted up. They're simply aspects of one God in three different modes of activity relative to existence, if you will, but still beyond it. Each one of the three goddesses would not be generated from each one of these three aspects, though. That's another thing that's misunderstood. Some would say, okay, well, you know, you have a triple creative goddess, a triple preserving goddess, and a triple destructive goddess. It's actually not the way it goes. A more appropriate way would be compare them. If I'm a little about doing so, but for a better understanding conceptually, I'm going to use basically the Greco-Roman concept, which basically would put the three goddesses in creative mode mutually, since they're cooperative and co-equal, under the form of the three graces that would basically fall within the correlation to the creative aspect of God himself as well, but still allow them to be in that form as female counterparts of God. As the Fates, as most people would be more familiar with them, they would be more within the lines of the preserving neutral aspect and maintain and regulate everything. And that would be corresponded to God in basically Zeus of the Fates, leader of the Fates, and that kind of concept. And that would still fall within the confines of what I've just stated. And then as God's destructive aspect, the three goddesses would also have their destructive aspects, which would be comparable to the Furies in their aspect of retribution, so on and so forth. But it's a lot more complex than that and goes way beyond those limited confines. So it would be wrong to just simply say that's how it is, so that's how it goes. It's far more transcendent than that, but it's present. You can find it in a lot of different examples, and what we've had happen today, especially with the various modern movements out there, is they want to see only what they want to see, and they build irrelevant systems based more on the occult concepts rather than the actual foundational principles of the cultures that they claim that they draw these different factors from. And they try to merge too much in and try to call it all good, like the whole concept, all gods are one god, and all goddesses are one goddess, and both are, you know, two aspects, male, female personalities of one ultimate deity. That is actually a more of an occult fiction based off Kabbalism and everything else, which in itself is based off of bad interpretations of the Old Testament or the Torah. And when you really trace it all the way back, you'll find that it's just complete bullshit, you know? Because the original creator of the universe is not presented at, you know, well, what they understood the universe to be as only the world, a limited little view of existence at the time. They didn't have a concept of anything outside of creation beyond the earth. So what we have to do is we have to really take a lot of these factors into proper perspective and not try to grasp our own, you know, philosophical concepts on things in that regards. And we have to just look at the information in question and draw a proper conclusion from the information as it's presented from these original sources, and not just the convoluted mess that we basically have crammed down our throats. In essence, you let the information guide you to the consistency of the subject matter. You don't just simply invent it willy-nilly and then draw the conclusion that every single representation is the same representation just in multiple forms. That is not actually accurate. But you also have to understand, if you want to go with the Egyptian sources, obviously I cannot pronounce all the words or names associated with the concept, But I'm going to present basically one thing here, and that's often a particular divine figure often had 5 names. 4 known ones, and then supposedly a secret one only known to the particular priesthood or priestesshood, as you will. But you have God ultimately fall down with, like in the Egyptian concepts, under the name of Montu, which is M-O-N-T-U. And then, of course, Ta, and the combined figure of Amun-Ra, and then, of course, the figure of Shai. And with Montu, you have the 3 goddesses represented as Tjenenet, Iyunit, and Reteu. And I'm probably not pronouncing those right, but they're basically spelled T-G or T-J-E-N-E-N-E-T. The next one is I-U-N-Y-T, and the third is R-T or R-E-T-T-A-U-Y. The other names we've heard before, so they're a lot easier to pronounce, but basically with Ta you have the 3 goddesses associated as Sekhmet, Bastet, and Wajet. For Amun-Ra, they're Worset, Amunenet, and Mut. And for Shai are the 3 Shaiets, or Shaites, which are Meskenet, Renunetet, and Shepset. And of course, those would be considered within the aspects I mentioned. Where it comes to Zeus, you got to understand that they use the name Zeus, or Zeus, because there was more than one type of Zeus, basically, in the Greco-Roman concepts. Most people, when they think of Zeus, they're actually thinking of a figure provided as Jove. Jove or Jupiter, I believe, are the 2 different versions. But anyway, in any case, the word Zeus essentially just meant God. So, of course, you have Zeus represented as Zeus More Getes, which basically means Zeus, leader of the Apportioners, meaning the Fates, associated with the 3 goddesses Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. And this is actually well noted that that's how the early Greeks, prior to the Pythagorean whatever, made the cross comparison, and they were very clear on the fact that each of the goddesses were 3 separate and distinct but co-equal goddesses. And then this particular Zeus, leader of them, as well as them being his consorts, is over and above them. Literally the first being of all beings within that. And it's also from Zeus that we get the name Deus anyway, so go figure. There were similar forms under the various Etruscan and Roman concepts, where the name for God was Tenaya, and then the 3 goddesses associated with are often Uni or Uni, Minerva, and Thalna. But also in the Greek and Roman sources, some of them, you've got Jupiter, with the 3 goddesses Juno, Minerva, and Etruska, or Etruski. Then in some cases, you find comparisons in these forms with Zeus, and then the 3 goddesses Hera, Athena, and Demeter. Other sources, you've got the kind of lower level, where it's actually Pan. And the Pan in question isn't the same one as the son of Hermes. There's actually an older one, interestingly enough, if you do the research, and associated with the 3 goddesses that are essentially the Graces, with Agalia, or Aglalia, I can't pronounce it, Euphrosyne, and Thalia, which again goes back up to being very similar to Thalna from the Etruscan sources. But then, when you got the underworld version of it, you got Theos Tithonios, which basically means God of the underworld, with the Furies, Tisiphone, or Tisiphone, Megaria, and Alecto. And that's again Greco-Roman. Some sources also place Saturn in that mix, with the three goddesses in that particular case given as Venus, Gaia, and Diana from Greek and Roman. So it's really, if you really dig and not just go with the first surface pantheons that you're usually exposed to with like Hesiod, you get a lot more details with that. So I hope that actually answers some questions.